And the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Now, can you start off by just giving us some background on yourself? To begin with, where and when were you born?
I was born in 1948 in Enid Valley, Pennsylvania.
Okay, what part of Pennsylvania is that in?
That's western, right on the High line, western Pennsylvania, right in the High Pennsylvania border.
Okay, and then did you grow up there?
Yes.
Okay, and what did your family do for a living?
Farmers.
Okay, and what kind of schooling did you get?
I went through high school.
Okay, and when you finished high school, did you go to work or what did you do next?
But not really. I couldn't get a job anywhere because I was 1A and I got drafted.
Okay, so how soon after finishing high school did you
Right, I went in right after, like January, yeah.
Okay. Now, up to that point, how much did you know about the war in Vietnam? And
Been to a couple funerals, about all I knew about it. You know, people that I'd gone to school with that were older than I was.
okay, and did you have any understanding of what the war was supposed to be about?
Not really, no.
Okay. And had you been expecting to get drafted?
Yes.
All right. So you get drafted. Okay, let's take me through the process here. You get your draft notice. Then what do you have to do?
I had to go to Newcastle, and then they bused me to Pittsburgh and went through all the physicals and everything. Sent me back home and just waited for your paperwork, and then went back to Pittsburgh, and they flew me down to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for basic training.
Okay. Now, when you were doing the physicals and stuff like that, did you see any evidence of people trying to find ways to beat the system or get weeded out?
Not really. No, I didn't really pay any attention.
No, you just did what they told you.
I was scared to death by then. I just wanted it over with.
All right. So then you go into basic training.
Right.
Can you describe a little bit the camp where you were training? What was it like?
Red sand and pine trees. It was Fort Jackson. I mean, we went through basic there, and then after that we were assigned, I was assigned to Fort Sill, Oklahoma for artillery training.
Okay. Just in the basic part, what was the routine for you? How did they treat you there?
Drill and training and rifle, and familiarize you with the rifle and stuff like that.
Okay. How much emphasis was there on military discipline and following orders?
A lot. Yeah, back then there was a boot to the hind end if you didn't do it. Right now you can't touch them, but it was a lot different.
Okay. Now, did you have some guys who you were training alongside who had a certain amount of attitude or kind of pushed back or didn't want to be there?
Well, there was a lot of them, but it kind of got corrected there after a while. Why? You either got along or got out, and you didn't want the out because that was a brig usually.
Okay. Did you have a sense of where these guys you were training with were from? I mean, were they from?
Yeah, we knew roughly. This guy was from South Carolina. That guy was from. You made a few friends, but there wasn't really time for much of that. I mean, it was just
right.
Drill training, get out of bed and run. And
yeah. What kind of shape were you in when you went down?
I was in pretty good shape when I went in. It wasn't really that tough for me.
Okay.
Some of the kids that were city people, now they had a struggle. I mean, it was tough.
I mean, between the heat and just physical
Well,
activity?
the physical activity, like I said, I come off a farm. It didn't bother me any, but some of them people, they really took a beating.
All right. How long did the basic training last?
I think it was 6 weeks. I'm not real sure. I don't remember.
All right. And then what did they do with you once you finished that?
They just got us in a line and said, you and you are going here and you're going there, and they sent me to Oklahoma.
All right. You go to Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
Right.
All right. That's artillery training
Right.
down there. All right. And can you describe the training you got there?
It was mainly just on the guns, and then we had to fire everything to know how to do it, but it was just a lot of schooling on the guns and that, and then from then I had a chance to go to NCO school, which as soon as you signed up for it, you were a corporal. And then on the completion of NCO school, you were an automatic sergeant then, and that's what I went over to Vietnam as.
All right. How did they get you to sign up for NCO school?
It was voluntary. It was a chance. I figured if I'm going, I might as well go as a sergeant and make some money.
I mean, did they have a sales pitch for it, or just anybody who wants to?
No, they just had openings because there were some of the NCOs that made some multiple trips to Vietnam, and they were having trouble getting people.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a chance for me to go over as a sergeant instead of a private, and it was a good time in the States too. It was almost a year by the time I got done with everything.
All right. And would you, at least the time you signed up, was there an expectation that you would stay in the Army longer because you were doing that?
No, I don't think.
Because I guess at times people who got the offers for OCS or NCO school, sometimes that was...
Well, they had to extend where I didn't. This was just training.
Right. Okay. Now, you mentioned when you went to the artillery school, how long were you there before you went into the NCO school?
I forget what the training was, 8 weeks or something.
Okay.
Just a basic whatever the artillery training was.
But you go through the regular routine
Right,
that
right.
everybody else does.
Yeah, right.
All right. And what specific weapons did you train on?
All of them. You had to train on all of them. You familiarized yourself with them, but you didn't really do that much shooting on them.
Okay. And for our audience who doesn't know a whole lot about this kind of thing, when you say all of them, what kinds of guns are we talking
You
about?
got the 1.0 Deuce, or it was a 105. Then you have the 155. Those are towed units. And then you have the 8-inch, or the 105, 1.0 Deuce SP. Then the 155 self-propelled, and then you got an 8-inch and a 175.
All right. So basically, these are all medium and heavy artillery
Right,
pieces
right,
we're looking
right.
at here. All right. And some of them self-propelled and other ones
Yeah.
towed. Okay. Now, with the OCS school, I mean, what are they teaching you there?
I wasn't in. I was an NCO.
NCO, right?
You're right.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. Just the familiarizing you with the gun and how to operate it and be in charge of it mainly. You were responsible when that round left the tube. You were responsible for it. I mean, you had to have everything right or have a good crew with you that knew how to do it, or you were in trouble. Because if you shot out, it may be friendly fire, and you didn't want that happening.
Okay. And how many men would be in a gun crew for one of these?
The 155 had 13. Was a gun crew.
Okay. And what did they do?
Well,
Were there particular jobs?
You had a gunner, you had an assistant gunner, and he was in charge of the breach and everything. Then you had your RTO, he took all the information from FDC. You had your powder man, you had your man that run the Joes, the rounds, the different rounds, and you had the fuses, you had to know what to do there. Then you had 2 men run a loading tray and 1 run a ramrod to push it in, if you had a full crew.
All right. And you're mentioning powder. I mean, so these are big, so you have a projectile.
You have a tube with 7 charges of powder in it.
All right.
And according to the elevation and the range, FDC would give you the powder charge, the round, and the fuse that you had to set it on, or the time if it was a PD point detonate, a delay, or a time fuse, whatever they called for, you had to adjust it.
All right. Did they give you anything that we would call sort of leadership training or?
Oh yeah,
like
you
that?
did marching and drilling and took leadership training, yes.
Okay. And that, you're still doing this at Fort Sill?
Right, everything was at Fort Sill, yes.
Okay. And how long does that school take?
It was the rest of my state time. It was almost a year before I got home. I went through basic, then AIT, and then NCO school. Yeah.
All right. Now, were you hoping that maybe they'd run out of war before you got there?
No, I didn't. That wasn't going to happen.
All right. Now, when you're in training in these different stages, were you being trained by men who had already been in Vietnam?
Yes,
or back?
most of them had.
Okay.
Yes.
And did they tell you anything about it, or?
Oh, a little bit. They told you to know your job and do your job. But you were responsible for those men's lives, and you had to know what you were doing. I mean, they were depending on you, and so were the people in the field.
Mm-hmm. Did they say anything more specific about stuff to watch out for, or things the Vietnamese did, or anything like that?
Not really. That was more, once you got over there, you went through a little bit of in training there. I think it was 4 or 5 days in the rear out there, and they give you the do's and the don'ts and what to watch for.
All right. So you get through all of that. You've had a better part of a year doing this. Now, so you get to go home before you go overseas?
Yeah, I went home for Christmas. Yeah.
All right. Now, what was that like to go home for Christmas and knowing you were going to Vietnam next?
Something you had to do. I mean,
Just didn't really think about it.
no,
just did
it was my turn in the barrel is the way you look at it. I mean,
Okay. Now, how do they physically get you over to Vietnam?
let's see. I think I don't even remember. I know I went to Pittsburgh and I flew out of Pittsburgh, and I don't even remember where I went. I think we went out of Fort Lewis, Washington, but I'm not real sure.
Okay, yeah.
It's been too long.
Yeah, a lot of guys did.
Yeah.
That was pretty standard. Do you remember where you landed in Vietnam?
Not really. No, he was
Okay.
down south, but
Yeah. So some big base. down
yeah,
south.
one of the big Ponson. I don't know where
Okay.
it was down there. I really don't know.
All right.
I don't remember.
All right. And then when you got there, did you know what unit you were going to join, or what do they do with you when you land?
No, you go through I don't know what the word I want to use. They divide you up in groups and send you on to whatever unit you were to go to. They give you the, like I said, the in-country training and the spiel, and then they send you on up to where you were sent. What group? I mean, I was sent up to I Corps.
What does the in-country training consist of?
Well, just the do's and the don'ts and what to watch out for and keep out of the towns and all that stuff, which we didn't have to worry about. We were so far out in the sticks, there wasn't any towns.
All right. And then did you know what unit you were going to join once you went through that and they sent you up, or did you have to get up to I Corps?
We got up there and they signed us. I knew I was going to the 101st, but I didn't know where. I knew I was going to the 155 artillery, but I don't believe I knew which battery I was going to.
All right. Now, at what point so when do you actually join the 101st then, in terms of rough date?
I don't remember. I don't know whether we were assigned before we left the country, after AIT, or when we got here. I don't remember now.
Okay. But to physically join it would have been, say, January?
Somewhere in January, yeah, in 70, yeah.
And where were they based when you joined them?
They were in I Corps.
Okay. But then within that, were you on a particular fire base, or?
No, I was on 12 or 13.
Okay.
Some of them multiple times, but we were moved around wherever they needed us.
All right. And what specific unit did they assign you to?
155 towed howitzer.
But
2nd, 11th Artillery.
Okay, so 2nd Battery, 11th
Artillery, yes.
Okay. And they were, now, was that a divisional artillery unit that
Yes.
supported different units
That was
at different
division,
times?
yes.
Okay. Now, when you joined them, were they deployed on a fire base?
Yeah, I believe they were. Like I said, I don't remember which one. They were already, they flew me out to a fire base.
All right. Now, when you get out there then, are you assigned a gun right away?
No, there was an E6, Sergeant Davis. I was assigned as his gunner, which my gunner already was his gunner, but I was just filling in, learning well, then he got called home on emergency leave, and I was given his gun, and I had it the rest of the time I was there.
All right. So how long was he there while you were there?
Not long enough. Not long enough.
All right. What was the most challenging thing about stepping into that position?
I don't know. I think the responsibility of the men was what bothered me the most. It would have been awful to come home and know that you'd lost somebody. For me, anyways. I mean, that was my biggest fear.
Now, how long did it take you to get oriented to just doing the job of commanding the gun?
Real quick. I mean, there was nobody to back you up. You either knew what you were doing or you were in trouble. I mean, you didn't have you already had the training. You just had to utilize the knowledge. And I was green. I mean, the gunner probably knew more about it than I did. I mean, everything you learned in school you throw out, and combat's altogether different. I mean, there's no comparison. I mean, the basic knowledge is the same, but the shortcuts come quicker. I mean, you just don't do that kind of stuff.
All right. You get in there, you join the group, you meet the sergeant, and then he's gone, and there you are. Did you make a point of doing anything or acting in a certain way in terms of just to establish yourself with the men, or get acquainted, or what did you do?
I tried learning their respect, because if you don't have that, you're not, I mean, when it was time to hump ammunition, I humped ammunition. I mean, I couldn't see sitting back and letting them do the work. I didn't believe in that. I mean, they were just as tired as I was, and I was no better than they were, the way I felt about it.
Now, what was just the physical conditions like when you got to Vietnam? Was it hot or humid or?
Hot, dirty, filthy, no supplies, no water. I mean, you lived like animals.
All right, well, when you say no water, I mean, did they bring in water?
Yeah, they flew it in a big, I think it was a 500-gallon blivet. It was warm. The medic could run around and sample it and say it was contaminated, don't drink it. And you were standing in line filling your canteen up because that's all you had.
I mean, did they give you stuff to decontaminate the water or nothing like that?
No.
I don't mean, do guys get sick like that? I mean, if you're...
Oh, I don't know. Eating C rations, the stuff we ate, you were always had diarrhea or something. I mean, it wasn't good.
All right. Now, in the Ripcord operation, you're part of, and we're here for the reunion for. I mean, that's later on in the year. So
yes,
you got several months in country with this battery first. Can you describe kind of the pattern of activity and so forth that you were involved in before you got out to Ripcord?
Some of the fire bases weren't bad. They were like stand down or rear fire bases. You were just there putting in time work and replacing the unit that was out in the field. You got called up and went out. Some of them were a little hotter than others. That's all. It just Some had very little activity, and some were pretty active. It just depends on where you were at the time.
All right. Can you remember the names of any of these particular bases you were on, or?
Jack was a good one. That was one towards the rear. You had Granite, Gladiator, like I said, Ripcord. Oh, shoot.
Did you spend time in Camp Evans, or did somebody else have that then?
Jack was as close to Evans as we got.
All right. Yeah. How did they, when you went from firebase to firebase, how did that happen?
They just give you orders, get the guns ready, and the helicopters, they give you time they were coming. You sling your gun up, have it ready to go.
Okay, and then the men load up in smaller helicopters?
Right. Well,
Or they go...
it depended on if they had the older CH-47s, they would just carry the gun. If they had the newer ones, they would take the gun and the crew.
Mm-hmm.
It depended on what they sent out at the time. Or if they sent a crane, which they didn't happen, but maybe twice the whole time it was there was no room for passengers there at all.
All right. Did they ever actually tow the guns behind trucks, or no?
No.
It was always helicopters, one place to another.
We were air mobile.
Okay. Now, when you were going in, were these two fire bases that were already set up, or did you go into new
Some
ones?
were and some weren't.
Did you ever get shot at as you were heading into a fire base, or that you can recall?
Not really, not that I can recall. Maybe get a few mortar rounds after you're on the ground, but as far as taking small arms fire, no.
All right. Yeah, so by then, the area is at least well enough under control that you're not getting shot at. All right. Now, when you go into a fire base, particularly if it's a relatively new one, what do you do once you land?
Well, they set up the pad where the guns are going to go. The chief of smoke or the first sergeant does that. And you dig your parapet and get your ammunition bunkers ready, and then your last thing you do is the hooches for your sandbag your hooches up where your living quarters.
All right. And can you physically describe what one of these hooches would be like? Or what it would
A hole in the ground with sandbags over top of it. The longer you were there, the better it was.
All right. You just add more sandbags to the top, or
Right.
other amenities? Okay. And so the intensity of what you were doing varied. It just depended on which base it was,
Right,
and
right,
what
right.
day, and that kind of thing.
Right.
Okay. Now, before you got to Ripcord, was your battery getting hit much or taking casualties, or was it
No,
fairly safe?
no, it was pretty safe. I mean, we had a few. Granite had a lot of activity on it. Gladiator had some, but a lot of them weren't that bad. I mean,
And when you did come under fire, was it mostly mortar rounds or rockets, or?
mortars, rockets, and small arms fire. Yes.
Okay. Now, were you on these bases before you got to Ripcord? Did any of those actually get attacked by
Yes.
Vietnamese ground forces?
Yes, they did.
And-
They tried getting sappers in a couple times.
And so when that happens, I mean, you're with the artillery. What do you see or hear when an attack
Yeah, you
happens?
can see an RPG coming at you. So one of them we were authorized to return fire because there was no friendlies out there. And that's what you did.
Mm-hmm. So, but if a sapper attack comes with the artillery, you're not in a position to do a whole lot.
We had guards.
Mhm.
You pulled guard duty 24/7.
Okay.
One of the men in your section was responsible for your gun because if you got a fire mission, he had to get everybody up and going. So you always had a man up 24/7.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you have what kind of weapon did you carry?
M16.
Okay. So they're not just giving you a pistol or
No,
something
no,
like that, or
right.
even a carbine. So you got a regular M16. And did you prefer having that to something smaller and lighter? Or did
No,
you-
that was good.
Okay.
When we needed an M16, we were in trouble.
Yeah. All right. Now, before you got to Ripcord, I mean, were you in any fairly substantial engagements or operations?
Just a
You remember?
sapper, Granite and Gladiator, like I said, they were two hot ones.
Mhm.
We had a couple sapper attacks and mortar rounds and RPGs.
All right. And now, can you describe a little bit? I guess at the time your unit gets assigned to Ripcord. Who was your battery commander?
Oh, jeez. I think Captain Baxendale, but I'm not real sure.
Okay. And then, were there other officers in that unit?
Yes,
serving
yeah.
along with you?
He was the captain, and you had a first or second lieutenant. He was the XO, and then you had your chief of smoke, which usually was an E6 or Well, he should have been an E7 or E8. Every now and then you had an E6, depending on who they had available at the time.
Mhm. Now, you've got in your collection, you've got material on a fellow who was actually a former football player.
Right.
Bob Kelso. What was your connection?
He was
with him?
RXO.
Okay. And what sort of guy was he?
Nicest guy you ever wanted to meet.
And what kind of, I don't know, what kind of leadership style did he have, or what did he do with it?
He didn't need it. You just followed a man. He led by example, and there was no problems. You can talk to every man in my unit, in the 2nd 11th, and there's not one of them that have a bad word for him.
All right. Now, when you went, okay, how early on in the Ripcord campaign do you actually go in? Are you,
We went in at the beginning. Our guns were landed when they opened it up.
mm-hmm. All right. And then, was there a point at which this operation seemed to be different from the other ones, or how did that play out?
Well, it just kept getting worse and worse every day. The infantry units were getting beat out in the bush, and we were starting to get mortared. They couldn't get resupply in because the helicopters were getting shot at, and it just deteriorated every day until they finally give up.
All right. So physically, I mean, what was life like day to day on the fire base then for you guys?
It just went downhill every day. I mean, you never knew what, when, or how. You know, if it was your turn, it was your turn. You couldn't hide from it. The rounds were falling everywhere.
So you couldn't even have much of a sort of a regular routine there?
No. You waited for the FDC to say fire mission, and were on the guns almost 24/7 because, like I said, the infantry units out in the field were taking a beating and they were calling for support.
Yeah. Do you have a sense of sort of how long you might be awake at a stretch, or?
Maybe days, you didn't know. I mean, you slept when you could. If you sit down the side of the hooch or on the gun. I mean, whatever was available.
Mm-hmm. And did you ever get much of a sense of sort of how effective your fire was, or was there any way to confirm whether or not you got
Oh,
anything?
you would get body counts and that, but I don't know how accurate they were. We weren't privileged to that knowledge. Didn't ever filter down to the men on the guns.
Mm-hmm. How much contact did you have with the infantry units that were going in?
They were on and off. That was when they come on the base. That was like their stand down for rest and resupply, and then they would go back out in the bush. But we didn't. They'd see them walking through and say hello, and that was about it. You didn't want to make friends. It's too hard to say goodbye to a friend. I mean, the men in my section, we were close. Some of the other sections, but you just didn't. You couldn't get away from your gun for one thing, and you just didn't mingle with the infantry or anybody else.
Now, you mentioned that there were problems with resupply and so
Right.
forth. I mean, what did you need more of?
Everything we could get: ammunition, food, water.
What impression did you have of the leadership in the operation? I don't know, did you ever see much of Colonel Lucas, for example?
Oh yeah, I saw him quite a bit. Yeah.
And I mean, would he come around to the guns?
No, he didn't see much of him at all. You'd see him fly in and fly out, or whatever he was doing with the infantry, but he didn't come down around the artillery. No.
Okay, I guess you weren't really his battalion.
No.
per se.
Well, we were under him. Yes,
Yeah.
he was in charge of us, but our artillery officer was the one that he would give him the information, and then it would filter down to us.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, are there particular images or memories or things that, from the time in that battle that come back to you that you can talk about? I think it's going to stand out in your memory.
No, I don't think the beginning to the end we were there to win it myself. I mean, I just don't believe that if they would have put the effort in it, we could have won the war. And to say on a fire base like that, when you got men out in the field dying and you got an ammunition quota and you've meant it, that's wrong. If you're going to do that, you either go 100% or don't go at all. And that's still a bitter pill that I'll never swallow.
So you had the sense at the time that the powers that be or whatever were not supporting this properly.
It wasn't supported, right. And it wasn't our officers, it was clear up to Congress probably. I don't know, when they don't bomb Haiphong Harbor where all the supplies are coming in, what's that tell you? It's too late after they're on the Ho Chi Minh Trail and down in South Vietnam to stop them. I mean, I was dead against all that, but I was just a little pea in a pod.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, so how do you characterize the morale in your unit over the course of the time you were with them?
Well, Ripcord was dirt low because we'd lost men and you were just living like an animal, scared of your life every day. But basically, I had a good crew. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they were good men. They did anything I asked them, and I would take any one of them back again.
Right. Now, how long did you stay with the battery after Ripcord? 'Cause that's really only a few weeks
See,
there.
I got out in November 23rd. I went home.
Okay, and so you were with the battery the whole time until
Yes,
then?
yes.
Okay, so what did you guys do? Talk about sort of the ending of Ripcord. How?
I have no knowledge. From
Okay.
Ripcord on, I went on R&R after Ripcord. I was wounded, I think it was on the 20th.
Okay.
And I got out, I spent my 21st birthday in Sydney, Australia. And I have no recollection of what happened after that. I really don't. We've talked about it with some of the guys. I don't even remember what fire bases we were on. I probably just didn't care.
Okay.
I was short, I just wanted to go home.
All right. So you got wounded on Ripcord?
Yes.
And what hit you? Or do you
Mortar
not know?
round.
Okay, mortar round goes. All right.
We were humping ammunition off the lower pad. I wasn't quick enough.
Okay. Now there were some occasions on Ripcord where ammo supplies got hit and
Blew up,
so
yes.
forth. What's it like to be on a fire base when that happens?
You get in a hole and hide. When that helicopter was shot down, that old hilltop blew off. That destroyed the 1.0 Deuce battery.
Mm-hmm. Right. But you were with 155, so they were,
Right, I was down.
they were still
I were
functional.
below. We were below them. Yeah, we were functional the whole time. Yes.
Okay. And so you're wounded in the sequence. How long was that before they abandoned Ripcord?
I believe it was, like I said, the 19th or 20th. I was wounded. I'd have to look, and then it was closed on the 23rd.
Okay. So that's down pretty close to the
Yeah.
end by that time. All right.
And it didn't get any better after I left. I can tell you that.
All right. And eventually they actually evacuate the base and
Right.
blow off the top of the hill. So now, do you remember much about the R&R trip down to Australia?
I enjoyed that. I had a good time. I went to Sydney and I believe it was called Hyde Park. It was a beautiful. I mean, I just bought a new Polaroid camera and I was real proud of myself. One of them old ones with like an 8-track at the back of it. I'm walking through there and they had them darn air guns to scare the birds. Well, one of them went off and I jumped in a flower bed and I probably killed $1,000 worth of posies because it was just an automatic snap reaction. That thing went boom and I dove. And I got up and dusted myself off and figured I didn't have a soul there, so I didn't care and went on about my business.
All right. Do they do anything? Do they provide you with stuff to do or ideas about stuff, or you just get there and say, here, okay?
I had a room with a bed and air conditioning. I had hot and cold water and milk and ice cream and real food.
Yeah.
I was living the good
That's
life.
pretty good already. All right. Now, how long do you get for R&R?
Week.
Okay. And then, do you remember anything about the feeling you had when you had to go back?
Not really. I mean, I just go back and put my time in and go home. That's all I wanted to do.
So, as far as you're concerned now, the rest of the tour in Vietnam, that is pretty well just a blur. You were on
Yeah,
fire bases.
I do not remember. I have no knowledge of it. I really don't.
Okay. Now, how did they get you back home again? Was that on a commercial flight or a military flight? Or?
I think we flew commercial. Yeah, I flew into Fort Lewis, Washington, in my jungle fatigues, froze to death, and they got us our greens and sent us home. I flew from there into Chicago. I think I had a layover in Chicago, and then I flew into Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm. What kind of welcome did you get when you got back?
My parents.
Okay.
That was all I needed.
All right. Now, while you were over in Vietnam, did you have, or even for that matter, actually maybe more while you were in training in the States before that, how aware were you of how Vietnam was being reported in the news? Or
Not really. I didn't.
Not worrying about that. And then when you were over there, you on those fire bases, you're probably not.
No, we knew nothing. And,
When you were over there, I mean, did you have much communication from home? Did you get letters?
yes, I got letters.
Okay.
Parents, grandparents.
And did you write back?
Yes.
Okay. What kinds of things would you say in the letters?
I didn't tell them anything that was going on. Why let them worry that many miles? There's nothing they can do.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't even know I was wounded.
Yeah. Now, how badly were you hurt?
I got shrapnel in the thigh.
Okay. So just some
Enough to
slow you down for a while.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Now you got back, discharged at the end of 1970. So now that you're out, what do you do?
Try to find a job.
Okay.
There wasn't any.
And so how long did that go on?
Oh, I think I waited till the first of the year and figured I'd done enough that it's time to get a job, and I got a job in a coal mine back home. Guy hired me.
Okay. And did you stay with that or move on to other
A couple
stuff?
of years, and then I went into truck driving, and that's where I retired from. I drove truck for 32 years.
All right. When you got back, did people ask you about what you did in Vietnam, or did they?
Not really,
even know?
no. No, it was just closed the page, the book was closed. Until I started going to the reunions, I didn't even talk about it.
Yeah, how did you wind up going to reunions?
I read an article in the VFW about that Chuck Hawkins had written, and I got a hold of him, and he told me about the reunions, and I went to Fredericksburg, Virginia, was the first one. I believe that was '69.
Okay. And we're now in 2011 here. So what brings you back?
The friendship, meeting people. I found a lot of the men that I'd lost track of everybody. I mean, I found my gunner and Dave Snyder and Randy Burdett and Norm Sim, people I served with. It really means something to me to this day and always will.
All right. If you look back on the experience you had in the Army, I mean, what kind of effect do you think that had on you?
I think everybody ought to go to the Army, but you don't need the war. The training and the discipline is good. I think every kid should go through it, but not at the expense of their lives. I mean, this farce they're in Afghanistan and Kuwait, I mean, that's stupid. Those people have been fighting since they had stones and sticks, and you're not going to change them. Mm-hmm. Anybody that's willing to strap a bomb to his kid's back and send him out to blow it up, why, you can't defeat those kind of people. Mm-hmm. Let them go.
Yeah. Now, in Vietnam, you didn't really deal with that. I mean, were you ever really in a place where there were civilians around?
No, because I was always out on the hilltop somewhere. We had nobody really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, when people today think about Vietnam veterans and so forth, they often associate it with all sorts of negative stereotypes and things like that about what they were doing over there and so forth. But you're not involved with civilians. Another thing that comes up is drug use, for instance. I mean, when you're on a fire base like that, is there much of that?
There was a little.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't out of control.
Was it something that affected the performance of the unit?
In a way, yes. In another way, if you knew there was a problem, he didn't get any of the responsibility to do the job. Mm-hmm. And the biggest trouble we had, there was a drug problem in the rear, and they sent him out to the fire base. Well, that just sent us the problem. They got it off their backs, and we were stuck with it.
Okay. They can't deal with it, so they were assigned
yeah, send them out to the bush.
Yeah. And what were race relations like if you're on a fire base like that?
Not a problem at all. Mm-hmm. Not a problem at all. None.
Did you notice any of that back when you were in the States before you went over? Or?
Not really, no.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm from a small country town. We didn't even have we still don't have a red light to this day in that town. So.
Yeah. And it's the sort of thing where, and that happens. I mean, did you have black men in your gun crew?
Not in my crew, no.
Okay.
But my best friend David Johnson was in Randy Burdett's crew.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But basically, they were there, and you were just all doing the same job.
Yeah. That's
happens a lot.
They didn't want to be there any more than I did, but that's where they were assigned, so you make the best of it.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you think that the guys that you were serving alongside, I mean, were you making an effort to do the job right? Did that matter to you?
Yeah, they give it 100%. You had to. I mean, everybody had to carry their own weight. I mean, there was nobody to pick it up if you didn't.
And did you have a sense of responsibility toward the guys, the infantrymen who were out in the field?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, that's why we were there.
Yeah.
They were out there to protect us, and when they needed help, that was our job to provide it.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned earlier there were issues of ammo shortages and things like that. I mean, were there moments when you wanted to do something, or someone's calling for a fire mission and you can't deliver?
Well, we don't know that because it never got down to us. Yeah. But we knew it happened.
All right. Okay. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I get in. You actually very efficiently covered quite a few different things here. Sort of, is there anything else that kind of stands out about that experience or what it's like to actually be on a fire base like that?
Not really. I pretty much explained what went on to the best of my knowledge. I mean, everybody has their own intake and input in it.
All right. In that case, I'll just close out here by thanking you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Thank you for